So before, when we left off, we were able to make our enemy follow our player around whenever he sees him, as you can see here, and he keeps following him no matter where he goes. So the next thing we'll have to do is to make sure that our enemy can throw a knife at the player, or at least do the throw knife animation. And to do that, we will have to go into our range state. So let's go to the range state. And in here, we will have to make a function for throwing a knife. So basically, we can create a new function called throw knife. Let's go down here and call public void, or let's make it private actually. Private void throw knife. And we will have to make this function just as we did with the idle and the patrol. So every time some time has passed, we can throw a new knife, so it doesn't keep doing it all the time. So in the top, we make a private float called throw timer, and this one will indicate how long time has passed since we threw our last knife. And make a private float, and we call it throw cooldown, so that this will indicate how long it will take before we can throw the next knife. And we make a private bool called can throw, and this indicates if we can throw a knife or not. So down here we say throw timer plus equal time dot delta time, and then we say if our throw timer is larger or equal to our throw cooldown, then we say can throw as equal to true, and our throw timer is reset to 0. So basically this function is going to be called in execute all time. We increase our throw timer all the time. If the throw timer is larger or equal to our throw cooldown, then we set our can throw to true, and we reset our timer. If enemy dot if can throw, let's say like that, then we say can throw to false, and we say enemy dot my animator that set trigger throw. There we go. So let's try to save this, because we can do this because if we jump out in Unity here and we go to our animator, we'll see that we have a parameter called throw right here, and this throw parameter goes from run into our throw here and from idle into throw. So this condition here is set for us to be able to throw something, and the same goes for the enemy, and this is the enemy. That's it. So throw knife needs to be called inside our execute to make sure that it executes all the time. So if we save this, then it will try to throw a knife all the time now when it's in the range state. So let's see how it looks. We go up here and we jump up here, and he sees me and he starts throwing knives all the time, as you can see here, and he slides on the ground. This looks a little crazy. So first of all, we will need to set a timer. I don't know, what did I write in my notes? A good cooldown timer should be 3. So sorry, the cooldown can be set to 3. Let's try to save this and jump back into Unity. Let's run it again. We go, see, and now he doesn't. Yeah, okay, I think he threw it in the beginning. There we go, he threw a knife. Let's see, after 3 seconds, and then he throws it again, as you can see here. Okay. One problem here is that he's still sliding and running when he throws that knife, and that's not the point. He will have to stand still whenever he throws the knife. So to fix this, we'll have to go to the throw animation here and open the animator. Just click on the enemy, click on the throw, and then click on the animate here and double click on the attack behavior. Because in here we have to make sure that the enemy stands still whenever we start to throw something. And you might also have noticed, if we look here, whenever the enemy starts attacking, I stop running. If we jump up here and you can see that he attacks me with a knife, there, my character stops. Again, there, he stops running. And that's because we have the same animation behavior on both the enemy's attack and the player's attack. So whenever the enemy attacks, we will say that the player's attack is true, which is false, which is not true. And we say that the player, if he's on the ground, then we stop running. And that doesn't make sense because we only need to do this for the player if the player attacks, and we only need to do this for the enemy when the enemy attacks. So, because that both our player and our enemy is a character script, we can say animator dot get component character and say that the attack is equal to true, which means we can actually delete line 11 here, this one player instance attack true, and remove it. So this one works for both the player and the enemy. When the enemy attacks, it takes the animator on the enemy, gets the character component, which is the enemy component, which is, if we look at the enemy, now you can't see it from my image down here, which is a little stupid, but down here we have, no, it's actually up here. I'm totally losing my place here. So on the enemy, sorry about that, we have an enemy script. The enemy script is of type character, which means that we can go in here and get the component character, which gives us the enemy script, and set the attack to true so that the enemy knows that he is attacking right now. And we are going to use this to make sure we can't move stuff later. Then we need to make sure that we're not a player. Only do this when we're a player. So let's say if animator dot tag equals player, then we need to do this. So basically we will only do this if we are the player. We will stop running and set our velocity on the rigid body to 0 when we attack. Remember, we are not using the rigid body on our enemy, so this code cannot be reused from our enemy. That's why we're checking if it's a player first, because both our enemy and our player has an animator on it, and this animator has a tag up here. So in the player's case, the tag is a player. So when the tag is a player on the animator, we are 100% sure that we are on the player, and we need to stop him from moving when we are on the ground. If it's the player's case again, we will take the animator on the player, get the character component, which is the player script, because the player also inherits from the character, and then we will set the attack to true so the player knows that he is attacking. Besides that, we will have to set the what is it called, the animator's speed to 0. So animator dot set trigger speed 0. The player doesn't really need this. There we go. The player doesn't really need this functionality here. Why do I say set trigger? It's set float, of course. There we go. Again, the player doesn't need this functionality, but it doesn't matter if we do it or not, because setting the float, the speed to 0 when we're not running doesn't really matter. So basically we can just leave this line outside the if statement instead of writing it 2 times, or one instead of making another if statement that looks if it's the enemy. Okay, if we jump down here, we have another function we will have to change around. Right now we are taking the player's instance attack and setting it to false, but we can actually do the same thing as we do up here. We can just access the character script, because both our player and our enemy is a character, and set the attack to false here. So now it works for both our enemy and our player. Let's try to save this. Jump back into the game. And let's see if our character stops running when she attacks. There, she still slides. Let's see. And she still slides. Okay, so of course she slides because we haven't made sure that she can't run when she's attacking. So we will have to go back into our ranged script and make sure she can't run when you're attacking. But as you can see here, the player doesn't stop moving now whenever she starts attacking. So to make sure that she doesn't move when attacking, we need to open the script and find the enemy script somewhere there, and then go to the move function. And here we simply have to make an if statement that says if attack is false, then we are allowed to move here. There we go. Because if you remember just from a few seconds ago, we looked at this and made sure that attack is set to true when we are attacking, so to say. So if we save this and jump back into Unity, we should have an enemy that actually stops running when she attacks. Let's see here. She runs, attacks, stops attacking, runs, and she stops and she attacks. So right now you can see when we play the game, she doesn't attack right away because she needs one timer to run off. We can actually make her able to attack from the get-go, which makes more sense because the thing shouldn't be on cooldown right away. So go to the range state and set can throw equal to true from the get-go. If we do so, she should fire her animation right away when the player gets inside. Let's try here. There we go. Let's see. Boom. As you could see up here, she threw her knife right away. Okay, I think that's it for this video. In the next video, we can have a look at how we can throw a knife, actually instantiate a knife for the enemy. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and like my Facebook page. Also, if you like my tutorials, remember that you can either support me by going to the Patreon page, where you can get some different perks, and you can also support me by getting one of my projects. So thank you very much for watching. Okay, in the last video we made sure that our enemy could throw knives, or at least play the knife throwing animation whenever he gets in range of the player or he can see the player. So the next thing we'll have to do is to make sure that she can also throw a knife or instantiate a knife. If we click on the enemy, we will see that she has a knife position and a knife prefab. First of all, we'll have to give her a knife position by clicking create, going to create empty, dragging it onto the enemy, and renaming this one to knife position. So this one has to be placed at the place where the enemy can spawn the knife, so just a little outside her head here. We can always rearrange this position. So click on the enemy and take the knife position and drag it onto the knife position here. Besides that, she also needs a knife prefab, so go to the prefabs folder and take the knife here and drag it onto the enemy, as you can see here, like so. So now she has a reference to the knife that she can throw. And because we are inheriting from our character class here, we will have a function called throw knife. So the throw knife function here will already make sure that we can throw a knife in the right direction. So let's go down here to our enemy, click on the window and select the animator, or not animator, animation, sorry. When you've done that, make sure you have selected the enemy, click on the drop down over here and select enemy throw. Then we will need to figure out when we need to throw it, and I remember that we did it on the player from the 4th frame here. So on this frame right here, as we can see here. So to throw the knife, we will have to add an event by clicking the add event button, double click on the event, click the function here and click the throw knife and just give it 0 as a parameter. There we go. So if we stop the record and we play the game now, let's see what happens when she tries to throw a knife at me. And there we go. So now you can see whenever she throws a knife, it is actually instantiated and thrown towards the player already. So that's how easy that was. Okay, so we will have to add a melee range and a throwing range for the enemy, so that she can't attack you with knives right away when she sees you maybe, or you need to get a little closer. And we will also have to add a melee range so that she will start attacking you with her sword when you get too close. So let's open the script and go to our enemy. If I could find it there. And inside the enemy in the top here, we'll have to add some fields so that we can actually figure out if we need to attack, or if we need to throw a knife, or we need to attack with our weapon. So first of all, we need to make a property, or not like this. We'll have to make a public bool, and we call it in melee range, and in here we make a get. So this is a property, normal property, and if our target isn't null, so if we have a target, else this is not relevant, then we return vector2 dot distance between our transform, the enemy's position, and the target that transform that position. So this will give you a vector with the length, and it also needs to return if it's less or equal to the melee range. Right now I wrote 3, but we will actually have to set up a variable called melee range. Let's make a private float called melee range and serialize it, so that we can set it from outside. And let's just say that this is melee range here, so we can set it from outside and test it out. Else we just return false. So if we are in melee range, we return true, because we check if we have a target. If the distance between the target and us is less than the melee range, then we return true because we are in melee range. Else we return false because we are not in melee range at the moment. And we have to do the exact same thing for our throw range. So copy this one in melee range and paste it underneath and call it in throw range. And instead of the melee range here, we have to use a throw range, so just call it throw range and use it down here as well. So now we have an indication of if we are close enough to throw a knife, or if we are close enough to throw our weapon or attack with our weapon. Because we have a throw range that returns a bool. If the target exists, then we check if the distance between our position and the target's position is less or equal to the throw range. If it is, then we return true. If it's not, then we return false because we're not close enough to throw it, or we're too far away to throw it. So let's jump back to our patrol state here. And in here we have to check if we are in ranged, if we are too close enough to throw a knife before we go into the range state. So make ampersand here and say enemy dot in throw range. So if we are patrolling and we see the enemy, the player, we check, do we have a target? We do have a target because we have seen him. And are we in throw range? If we are close enough to throw a knife at him, we go into the range state and throw a knife. If we're not close enough, we keep patrolling till we get closer to him so that we can attack him. And then we go to the range state. So let's try to go out in our game here. And let's click on the enemy, and you'll see we have a melee state and we have a throw state on him now. So let's see, I wrote down what I thought it should be, 2. Let's see. So our melee range is put as 2 from my other game, and I have put the throw range as 12. Let's try to see what happens here, if she throws right away or she just runs a little closer to me. I go up here, let's see. Then she sees me and she runs closer, and then she throws a knife because she was out of range in the beginning. Right when I go inside the bounding box, she's out of range, so she has to move a little closer, like so, before she throws a knife. And you will see that this works if we take the throw range and put it down to, for example, 5. Then you'll see that she has to go way closer to me before she can actually attack me, as you can see here. And now she's close enough. But I will leave it at 12. There we go. So now that we can throw a knife on range, we will need to go back into our, or not back, but we will need to go into our melee state somehow. And to do that, we will go to the ranged state. And inside the update of the ranged state, we'll have to check if our enemy in melee range. So if our enemy is in melee range, then we say enemy.change state, not direction, but state, into new melee state. So then we switch into the melee state, and then we say else if here instead of an if, and in the bottom we have an else. This looks exact fine. It looks fine. So now we can change from our range state into our melee state when we get close enough, and this means that our enemy should just stop doing anything when he gets close to me. If we look here, and when he gets close enough, he should just stop doing anything. Oh, I forgot to save, I think. Let's see here. Let's try to save. Because I think we didn't put any functionality into our melee state. But okay, we have the move state at all times. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see here, when he gets close to me, he just stops doing something. He just plays the last animation he did whenever he got too close. So right now, she's actually inside a melee state. I know I keep saying he and she and everything. I know it's a female character, but sometimes I say he. I hope it's okay. So let's have a look at the melee state. So basically the melee state needs an attack function, and it needs to be exactly the same as our throw function. So let's go to our throw range state, copy this one, throw knife. We need to copy it and move to our melee state. I have way too many tabs open. And rename this to attack. Yeah. And then we go back to the range state and go to the top and copy all these the two floats and the bool, and jump back into our melee state. Go to the top, paste them here. And then we press F2 to rename them. Let's call it attack timer, and call this one attack cooldown, and call this one can attack. There we go. So now we have an attack function, which means that we need to go to our execute function and call attack. There we go. And then remember to save. So let's try this out before we add more stuff to it. If we save and jump into Unity, what did I do? The name enemy does not exist in the current sounds. Yeah, okay. So of course we need to create a enemy, private enemy, and we need to set it in our constructor inside our attack, inside our melee state. There we go. Okay, let's go back here and run the game. So now she should start attacking, but she would also be running weirdly around. No, she wouldn't actually. See, she gets close, and she is not attacking. Let's see, because I never changed the right animation. I'm rushing a little apparently. Let's see here. She inside the melee state, we don't need to do throw. We of course need to use the attack instead. So click on throw and replace it with attack. There we go. So now the attack function should work, so she just doesn't start throwing knives when she's too close to me. Try again here. Attack. Attack. So now she uses her sword to attack me when she's in range. But now she's basically screwed because she can't follow me anymore. And now she just stands there and attacks, and I can just kill her with knives if that's what I wanted. So we need to make sure she goes back into the range state if I get out on the range again. So inside the execute function, we'll have to set some things up. First of all, we need to say if enemy.in_throw range and the enemy isn't in melee range. So if we are in throw range, but we are not in melee range, well, that means that the player moved away from us. So we need to make sure we can follow him again. And we are in combat right now, so we say enemy.change state. And new ranged state. There we go. So when we are executing it, we are attacking the player. The player moves away from us, which means that our in melee range is false because we are too far away from him to attack. And we're still in throw range, which means that we can attack him. We can throw at him. So we actually just go into the range state here. So let's see what happens. Now she should start attacking us with knives instead when we go away. Knife, and then she should throw her sword. There we go. She's using her sword. And I move out on the range and she starts following me. And now she's following me to throw her knives at me. She'd throw a knife. There we go. So now we have an enemy that can start following us again after we run away from her. But of course we also need to go in idle when we lose our target, because if we look here, let's see, right now she can attack us and she goes in melee range and I run away and I jump down. Then she goes into idle right now because she's in range. But if I was in melee range here, let's see if I can trick her right here, there's a chance that she will go off the edge here, as you can see. So to prevent her from following me when she's in melee state, I will also have to make an else if that says if our enemy dot target is null. There we go. Is null. Then we say enemy dot change state new idle state. Oh wait, I don't need exclamation mark here. So if our target is null, then we go into our idle state instead. So now whenever the player jumps down, if we are he's attacking us with melee, he will go back to idle, so we don't have any errors there. Yeah, right now we can still lure her out the edge, but we'll add that in a later version. But right now, if we are standing here and she's meleeing us and we would get out of sight somehow, well then we would get out of sight somehow. We would make her go into the idle as we just saw here. So that was what I wanted to do in this video. In the next video we will start looking at dealing some damage, I think, to each other, so that the enemy can either attack the player or the player can attack the enemy. I think that's basically what we need as of right now to add to the enemy. Besides that, I just noticed there is some kind of bug we need to fix, because when I jump, I think when I fall, apparently he lands on something, and I think he actually lands on the enemy's side. That's why he lands in the air here. So let's just try to do something here. Let's say that our side here is in a new layer called enemy, and click on the side. So you click on the side, you click on the layer, and you click add layer and write enemy, and then you click on the side again and click on the layer and add enemy here, and then you click on the player and go to a script, and there's something called what is ground. I'm not sure if you can see this from my image here, but there's something called what is ground. So click on everything here and untick that one that's called enemy, so it goes into mixed. So let's see right now, he shouldn't be landing on the enemy's side anymore. There we go. So now he's not landing in the air anymore, and he's doing a normal jump as he should do. Okay, so I'm going to end the video. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, follow, and like my Facebook page. If you haven't done it already and you like my tutorials, please consider to support me somehow by Patreon. Maybe you'll get some perks out of it, or you can support me by getting any of my projects. Again, thank you very much for watching.